Welcome to the Spooky Holes. My name's David Saunderson, and today our guest is Dacre Stoker. How are you, Dacre?
David, I'm great here in sunny South Carolina.
Well, the weather looks quite nice there. I don't know. It's been quite nice here in London today. I mean, we obviously can't get out because of well, we could get out for a little bit of exercise, but coronavirus means that we're all stuck indoors. What are you doing to keep yourself busy in these interesting times?
Well, we are allowed to go outside. Some cities, it's shelter in place, but here my routine is really quite simple. I can walk my dogs in the morning, in the afternoon. I can get out and ride my bicycle. The biggest challenge I have is focusing on my writing work and not being distracted by the media of what's going on either with the world stock market or the world falling apart because of the pandemic, and as it's kind of creeping and getting closer and closer to where I live. Right now, there's not many cases in my area, but there's enough to know that we have to be careful when you go to the grocery store, wearing gloves, sanitizing the food and things when you get back, and just being really smart about being safe so that we don't become part of the problem as well as sadly other people who are not so fortunate.
Yeah, no, I mean, myself and my wife here, we're doing the same thing. We're going out for our walk for the day, which usually involves us going to the supermarket and then coming back. So, I mean, I'd rather feel that we're not part of the problem. I see people out there that are doing the wrong thing, but we're going to try to do whatever. But we've got plenty of stuff though to talk about that's not coronavirus. You're
We
talking about your
do.
work. What are you up to at the moment? I mean, you've obviously still riding a high on you know, your bestseller. We've got kind of, if you can see here, Dracul. There you go. It's. I see it's been signed. I'm actually wearing my Dracula T-shirt today. I'm very
Wow,
Dracula-ish today. It's
you
my very.
are very nice.
I
Yes.
didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's all very Dracula. So what are you working on?
Well, there's a couple of projects. One is a an annotated Dracula with Robert 18 Pisang. Robert is one of the two scholars, along with Elizabeth Miller, who brought to the world the publishing of the Dracula Notes. And he's a very highly regarded Dracula scholar. And we've been in contact and thought we'd do something really quite different that hasn't been done before. There have been quite a few annotated Draculas. Les Klinger did one a few years ago, huge, big book. Um, but one of the things that we are privy to and we are including in this annotated Dracula is the Dracula typescript that Paul Allen, his foundation owns. Mr. Allen's no longer living. And both Robert and I were able to analyze and study independently of each other the Dracula typescript. So we have notes on what was actually taken out of that. That's the last thing that Bram touched. So what you'll see in this book is the typed text, and we've figured out how to put back in italics certain things that Bram put in. There's things that a single line out of things that he took out. We've got different things that Bram's brother, Dr. William Thornley Stoker, put into the novel as he was the sort of the medical helper, the medical sort of supervisor when it comes to getting everything right. So we're including information from the typescript. The other thing, David, that's really cool that I'm including in is I got a hold from my Bram's great grandsons, my cousins, the actual 6th edition of Dracula that Bram used to cross out to 26,000 words to create the 1901 abridged edition of Dracula. So you see the process of exactly what Bram decided to take out. In some cases, he wrote little words in the margins of why he took things out, what things he put in. So that will be also highlighted in the book as to what was removed. So you're actually getting 3 books in one,
So
as
this is
well
this
as
is
a lot of scholarly stuff.
So this is stuff that Bram thought if you had to cut the book down, this is the stuff that doesn't matter, and this is the stuff that does. So as far as we're concerned, this is the essential cut down version of Dracula, as opposed to the Hamilton Deans and all the type of different versions that have been done over the years.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And kind of what it does is it's a statement, just as you said. What did Bram think was essential? But at the same time, there's some socioeconomic to this. And that was in those days, The inexpensive paperbacks were obviously for the general reading population who weren't as educated as the people that had the money to buy the hardcover when it first came out. So any references to Shakespeare, for instance, was taken out of the 1901 because they didn't expect that the middle class would go to see Shakespeare plays. And so what we're doing is we're looking at that and making comments ourselves on why Bram took that out, why Bram left this in. So that's one of the projects, and it's quite interesting because it's creative, but it's more, me going through having to make sure I've got everything right, the footnotes just right. It's not as creative as writing a story. So that's one project. I am actually working on a story at the moment, a series of short stories with a good friend of mine who's a professor at a university nearby. We're looking at certain elements of Dracula that may appeal to a Sherlock Holmes type fans, knowing very well that Bram Stoker and Conan Doyle were good friends, and Conan Doyle was one of the guys, and I think you and I have chatted about this, that sent a letter to Bram complimenting him on the novel and how much he loved Van Helsing as a character. Bram also wrote an extensive interview article about Conan Doyle and how his life was changing, getting married and so on. Bram and Florence were invited to Conan Doyle's wedding. So we thought we'd take that and say, all right, let's take out the supernatural and what if? One of these things where, what if Quincy Morris's father came back from America and said, just where the hell's my son? Like, what's going on? I want to know the truth. And if you're not going to be discussing this from a supernatural standpoint, you've got a death on foreign soil by either foreigners or a group of Brits that went over and did something. They've got to answer to this. And of course, you've got a Sherlock Holmes character that is going to try to unravel that. So that's something else. David, one of the other projects I'm involved in has something that's sort of been in the works for about 2 or 3 years. A guy from Mexico who's a scholar, he actually just finished his dissertation in Dracula, Enrique Palafox. He came to Transylvania with me on one of my tours, and he was also a graphic artist. And he was loving the textures, always taking pictures of cool castles and doors and floorboards and this. And he said, I'd really love to do something that reconnects the graphic world, the sort of the images, the books, the bags, the posters, the things that people buy that are all about Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee, but bring it back to Bram's original Dracula, inspired by what we call Back in Black, the original Dracula, who didn't have any medal or any dinner jacket. So we've been working closely, going through the novel and pulling out certain lines of text and inserting them, getting inspired, and then he would draw something, put it on a coffee mug, put it on a tote bag, put it on a t-shirt. And we're about halfway there. We put an initial amount of clothing up on our The Dracula store on Etsy.com. And then recently we've just worked on more, and they're going to be downloaded in a few days. Things like really cool early editions of Dracula covers on blankets and things like that. He found an old newspaper from Whitby that has the wreck of the Dimitri that was turned into the Demeter. He's turning that newspaper into, again, bags and posters and floor mats and that sort of stuff.
That sounds awesome. So where can people find that?
Well, it's going to be on Etsy.com, ETSY.com, The Dracula Store, all one word, capital T, Dracula, capital D, and then store. So it's all squished together.
Okay, well, we'll make sure we put that in the description here in the video. So you seem like you're really quite busy. But how is Dracul going though? I mean, you're at that's a bestseller. So what happens in year 2 or year 3 of bestsellerdom?
Well, thank you for asking. What normally happens is the hardcover came out in 2000 and what was it?
Year before
19.
last. Yeah,
year before last.
So 2018. So
18. Yeah, 18. Yeah, you've got the UK edition there with a really cool little cutout. I love that. It comes out, And then you got essentially about 6 to 8 months of me traipsing around the UK, different parts of America, going to some of the other countries. It was purchased in like 13 different territories, talking about the book. And then you've got a pause for 4 months or so, and then the paperback comes out. And when the paperback comes out, you do the whole thing all over again. And that's just finished for me. And now what's happened is we're sort of waiting with our fingers crossed, because the Paramount Studios, obviously with this pandemic, everything is ground to a halt, but they did actually purchase the film rights, an option on the film rights, which were about to expire, and then they purchased another 18 months. So it looks like our agent tells us they're really quite serious about turning the book Dracul into a movie. JD Barker, my co-author, and I are sort of, waiting on the edge of our seats, because we all know, like you do, David, that the BBC's version of Dracula came out, and some people absolutely loved it, and some people absolutely hated it, which is sort of typical of anything in the arts. But we think that Dracul would be sort of perfect to come out within the next year or so, because it really shows the origin of Bram Stoker writing the story that is now, front and center and so controversial. So yeah, we'll see if it gets done. But JD and I actually have an outline for our continuation of the story, because, as you know, the story ends with Bram Stoker about to start writing his novel Dracula. And the whole point is the things in his life lead up to him writing the novel Dracula as a warning to the world that vampires are real. So it took him about 6 to 7 years to write the story. So we've got this outline ready to go, but our agent has told us, don't start writing. I won't be able to sell it until the book has actually been turned into the movie and the movie's going. If the movie's going, I'll be able to sell this book like crazy. So boys, hold on, do some other things, and then you go.
So you've got lots of things going on at the moment, but it's just you're held up by fate, really, with the way the world's gone.
It is. I mean, I think I'm obviously not the only one held up by fate. There's a lot of people who were worse off, but it's okay, because it gives me an opportunity to sort of like, okay, put that over here on the edge of the desk for now. When things settle down, when fate will look kindly upon us.
You were actually supposed to be here, weren't you? You were supposed to be in London at this time of the year, weren't you?
And the plan was to come to Scarborough for the Horror Writers Association Stoker Con. I was going to do a presentation there. Prior to that, David, I was actually going to be up in Cruden Bay, Scotland, and that's actually where Bram Stoker spent 13 summer holidays and where he wrote good parts of Dracula. Some of my friends, horror writers, were going to come and join me in Cruden Bay, and along with my friend Mike Shepard, who actually wrote a book on Bram's time in Cruden Bay called When Brave Men Shudder, we were going to tour around and look at Slane's Castle and all these other cool places that did have an inspirational effect on Bram. And then we were going to go to Whitby and again look at the town that had such an impression on Bram when he spent a 2-week holiday there in 1890 that he changed the direction of the book and had the whole thing set in Transylvania, but also had the Count arriving into Whitby rather than Dover, and the rest is history. So Whitby and Cruden Bay for a couple of weeks, and then moving on to StokerCon. And then the other side of my life is this game of real tennis that I coached the #1 ranked player in the world. He was going to be contesting the World Championship in Colchester, but of course all of that has been sort of thrown in the bin and rescheduled for later in the year.
Yeah, no. So, well, anyway, I'm sure you'll be back because you're here quite often. I think for the time that I've known you, you've probably been here 3 or 4 times. So, obviously this is the Dracula, here in Ireland are the Dracula capitals of the world. So once this is all over, we look forward to seeing you here. So anyway, we'll leave it at that, Dacre. I'm glad that you're busy. I'm glad that you and your family are safe. And we'll look forward to hearing what happens with the Dracula store. We'll put the down in the bottom the description of how they can find out about that. And once you get the annotated Dracula sorted and these short stories, sounds like it's going to be great fun.
Thank you, David, and I always appreciate what you do to highlight the spookiness and the horror of Dracula and anything going on in my life. And you do great things with Spooky Isles. Thank you very much for all your efforts to help publicize what we do.
No worries. Okay, thanks very much for that, Dacre. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.